At 71 years old, Margaret Hale had mastered the art of silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because over the years she had learned that speaking only made people uncomfortable or annoyed. She lived alone in a modest, sun-washed townhouse on the quieter side of town. Cream-colored curtains fluttered gently in the afternoon breeze, and the walls were lined with photographs, birthdays, graduations, weddings, moments where she stood just outside the frame of attention, smiling softly, proud, invisible. Her son Ethan had once been the center of her universe. After her husband passed away unexpectedly in his early 50s, Margaret had done what many widowed mothers do. She poured everything she had into her child, emotionally, financially, completely. She told herself it was love, and for a long time, it was. A lifestyle built on her back. Ethan grew up comfortable, not spoiled, at least not at first, but secure. Margaret worked 2 jobs while raising him, putting money away quietly. She never complained, never showed exhaustion. When Ethan went to college, she paid tuition without hesitation. When he wanted to study abroad for a semester to find himself, she wired the money. When he graduated and wanted to take a year off to travel before settling down, she funded that too. Friends warned her, "You're doing too much, Margaret. He'll never learn responsibility." She smiled and said, "He's a good boy. He'll grow up." And in her heart, she believed it. The marriage that changed everything. Ethan met Lauren at a rooftop party in the city, the kind with string lights, artisanal cocktails, and conversations about networking instead of work. Lauren was beautiful, confident, sharp-tongued in a way people called honest. She came from a family that valued appearances and status, luxury cars, destination weddings, designer labels. Margaret tried her best. She paid for engagement photos. She contributed generously to the wedding. She wrote checks without being asked, rehearsal dinner, honeymoon upgrade, custom suit for Ethan. She thought generosity would buy her closeness. Instead, it bought her access, conditional, polite, distant access. Becoming the background character. After the wedding, Ethan and Lauren moved into a house far beyond their means. Margaret helped with the down payment. She told herself it was temporary. Temporary became permanent. Soon there were supplemental credit cards in Ethan's name attached to her account for emergencies. Emergencies became weekend getaways, luxury dinners, new furniture, spontaneous trips, high-end gym memberships. Margaret noticed, of course, but she said nothing. She adjusted her budget quietly, cut back on things she enjoyed, canceled a book club, postponed travel, shopped sales. When Ethan called, it was usually with a problem. "Mom, the AC broke. Mom, we're short this month. Mom, Lauren's car needs repairs." She helped every time. How they spoke when she wasn't there. The shift was subtle at first. Lauren's tone changed, less warmth, more impatience. Margaret noticed how conversations stopped when she entered rooms, how Lauren checked her phone mid-sentence, how Ethan sighed when Margaret asked simple questions. At family gatherings, Margaret brought dishes and helped clean up automatically. No one asked her to sit. No one offered her a glass of wine. She told herself she was being sensitive. The overheard conversation. Everything changed on a Sunday afternoon. Margaret had gone to her niece's Clara's house for tea. Clara lived nearby and often helped Margaret with errands and technology. While Margaret sat in the kitchen, Clara stepped outside to take a call, leaving her phone on the counter. It buzzed. A text preview flashed across the screen. From Lauren. Clara didn't mean to read it, but it kept buzzing, and then the voicemail started playing automatically. Lauren's voice filled the quiet kitchen, laughing, mocking. Honestly, I don't know how she doesn't feel embarrassed, living off her savings, acting like she's helping us when she's basically freeloading emotionally. Ethan says just let her pay. She doesn't do anything else with her money anyway. Silence followed, the kind that makes your ears ring. Margaret sat frozen, teacup trembling in her hands. Freeloader? After everything? Clara rushed back in. Margaret didn't tell anyone what she had done. Not Clara, not a friend, not even her sister. She went about her days as usual, grocery shopping on Tuesdays, morning walks, quiet evenings with classical music playing softly in the background. The difference was internal. She felt lighter. And somewhere across town, the first crack in Ethan and Lauren's perfect lifestyle was about to appear. The dinner that was meant to impress. It happened on a Friday night. Ethan and Lauren were celebrating. Lauren had just posted a carefully curated photo on social media, her hand holding a crystal glass of wine, city lights blurred in the background, captioned, "Hard work pays off." They were dining at La Belle Étoile, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, the kind where menus didn't list prices and servers spoke softly as if loud voices might disturb the food. Lauren chose it deliberately. She loved places that made her feel important. Ethan was nervous, not about the bill, but about appearances. Still, he smiled and nodded as Lauren ordered freely. Appetizers, imported wine, the chef's tasting menu. When the check arrived, Lauren didn't even look. She slid the black leather folder toward Ethan. He reached for the card, Margaret's card, the one he had carried for years without thinking. Declined. The server returned quickly, too quickly. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly, eyes flicking around. "It appears this card was declined." Ethan laughed reflexively. "That's impossible. Try it again." The server nodded politely. A moment passed, then another. "I'm afraid it's still not going through." Lauren's smile froze. People were watching now. Ethan's hands began to sweat. "Do you have another card?" the server asked gently. Lauren snapped, "Of course we do." But she didn't move, because they both knew they didn't. The slow realization. Ethan's heart pounded as he pulled out his phone and checked his banking app. The balance stared back at him, stark and unforgiving. $842.17. His chest tightened. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. Lauren leaned in, whispering sharply, "Call her, now." Margaret's phone rings. Margaret was at home, reading. Her phone buzzed on the side table. She looked at the screen. Ethan. She waited until the ringing stopped. Then, calmly, she sent a text. "I'm unavailable right now. Is everything okay?" At the restaurant, Ethan stared at the message. Lauren hissed, "Unavailable. She's retired." "Just call her again," Lauren said, louder now, but Margaret didn't answer. Public humiliation. Eventually, Ethan had no choice. He asked the server for a payment plan. Lauren stared at him like she didn't recognize him. They paid with a combination of 2 personal cards and cash, scraping together just enough, declining dessert, skipping the tip they would normally leave. As they walked out, Lauren's face burned. "This is humiliating," she snapped. "This is her punishing us." Ethan said nothing. For the first time, he felt afraid. The confrontation attempt. The next morning, Ethan showed up at Margaret's house unannounced. Lauren waited in the car. Ethan knocked hard. Margaret opened the door calmly. "Yes?" she asked. "Why did you cancel the cards?" Ethan demanded. Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Oh, you noticed." "A boundary, not a fight." "You embarrassed us," Ethan said. Margaret smiled gently. "I didn't embarrass you. I stopped paying." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You could have told us." "I could have," Margaret said softly, "but you didn't tell me you were calling me a freeloader either." The color drained from his face. Truth has weight. Ethan stammered, That was taken out of context." Margaret stepped aside and gestured to the living room. "Would you like to sit?" she asked. "No," he snapped. "I just want this fixed." Margaret's expression hardened, not with anger, but resolve. "There is nothing to fix." She looked him in the eyes. I raised you to stand on your own. Somewhere along the line, I forgot that lesson myself. The ultimatum that wasn't. Ethan tried guilt. You don't need the money. Margaret nodded. True. Then why do this? Because I need respect. Silence. Then she added quietly. The first week after the card declined felt unreal to Ethan, like standing on solid ground that suddenly revealed itself to be thin ice. Nothing catastrophic happened at first, and that was the problem. The bills didn't stop coming. The mortgage didn't pause. Life kept moving forward, indifferent to panic. Except now there was no invisible hand quietly catching them. The house that was too big. Their home, once a symbol of success, began to feel like a trap. The mortgage payment alone swallowed more than half of Ethan's monthly income. The utilities, once ignored, now felt offensive. Lauren noticed first. "Do we really need the lights on upstairs?" she asked one evening. Ethan looked at her. That had never happened before. The math doesn't lie. Ethan sat at the kitchen table late one night, surrounded by statements. Credit cards, car payments, subscriptions he didn't remember signing up for. He did the math 3 times. The result didn't change. They were living 2 lifestyles above their reality. Margaret's money hadn't been help. It had been camouflage. Lauren's cracks began to show. Lauren tried to maintain appearances. She kept posting online, smiling photos, vague captions about manifesting abundance. But offline, she was changing. Shorter temper, sharper words, long silences. She blamed Ethan. "You should talk to her again," she said. "She owes you." Ethan didn't answer, because deep down, something ugly was forming. Not resentment toward Margaret, but recognition. The call that didn't go as planned. Eventually, Lauren took matters into her own hands. She called Margaret directly. Margaret was packing for her trip. "Yes," she answered. Lauren didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk about the finances." Margaret paused, then sat down slowly. "I don't think we do." Lauren laughed bitterly. "You can't just cut us off like this." "I can," Margaret said calmly, "and I did." Lauren's voice sharpened. "You're punishing us over a joke." Margaret's voice softened. "No," she said, "I'm protecting myself from disrespect." Silence. Lauren tried one last angle. "You'll regret this." Margaret smiled. "I already regret waiting so long." The beginning of isolation. After that call, things changed. Friends stopped inviting Ethan and Lauren out. Not intentionally, just subtly. Dinner invitations dried up. Weekend trips vanished. When money stops flowing, convenience disappears with it. Ethan noticed who checked in, who didn't. The illusion of control shatters. Lauren began returning items, quietly. Shoes still in boxes, unworn dresses. Ethan saw the refund notifications. It hurt. Not because of the money, but because it confirmed the truth. They were unraveling. Margaret's new world. Meanwhile, Margaret stood barefoot on a quiet beach. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, patient and vast. She woke up when she wanted, ate when she felt hungry, walked without checking the time. She talked to strangers, laughed. For the first time since her husband died, she felt like a woman again, not just someone's mother. Ethan's sleepless nights. Ethan lay awake most nights, not thinking about money, but memory. The way his mother used to pack his lunches, the notes she left, the sacrifices she never announced. He remembered calling her for help and her answering every time. Shame crept in slowly, relentlessly. The argument that changed everything. One night, Lauren snapped, "This isn't what I signed up for." Ethan stared at her. "What did you sign up for?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer, because the answer scared her too. Downsizing. 3 months later, they listed the house. Lauren cried when the realtor left. Ethan felt relief. They moved into a smaller apartment across town. No guest room, no showpiece, just reality. Margaret's return. Margaret returned home glowing. Neighbors noticed. Ethan sat on the edge of the chair like a child waiting to be scolded. Margaret noticed everything, the slump of his shoulders, the way his hands folded and unfolded, the absence of entitlement that had once filled the room when he entered. She poured tea slowly. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned. The apology that took years. "I was wrong," Ethan said finally. Not rushed, not defensive. Wrong. Margaret looked at him. She had waited years to hear those words, and now that they arrived, she realized she didn't need them as much as she once thought. "I let things go too far," Ethan continued. "I let you become a resource instead of my mother." Margaret nodded once. "That's exactly what happened." He swallowed. "I didn't protect you, and I didn't respect you." That was when Margaret felt it. Not anger, not sadness, but release. Lauren's last stand. Lauren didn't come that day. She came a week later, unannounced. Margaret opened the door and found her standing stiffly on the porch, arms crossed, pride barely holding itself together. "I won't apologize for wanting stability," Lauren said flatly. Margaret studied her. "You didn't want stability," she replied gently. "You wanted comfort without contribution." Lauren scoffed. "So now you're punishing us forever?" Margaret shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm just no longer rescuing you." Lauren's eyes flickered because rescue had become expectation, and expectation had become entitlement. Boundaries clearly drawn. Margaret spoke calmly. "I will always love my son," she said, "but my money is no longer part of your marriage." Lauren opened her mouth. Margaret raised a hand. "This is not a negotiation." For the first time, Lauren had nothing to say. What didn't change? Margaret didn't reinstate the cards. She didn't reopen accounts. She didn't reverse her will. She donated to charities supporting widows, education, and women starting over later in life. She volunteered. She lived. What did change? Ethan learned, slowly, painfully. He worked longer hours, budgeted, learned restraint. He visited without asking for anything. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat, and that was enough. A life fully hers. Margaret traveled alone, Italy, Portugal, quiet towns no one bragged about. She made friends half her age. She danced. She laughed loudly. She spent money without guilt on herself. The moment of clarity. One afternoon, sitting at a cafe overseas, Margaret watched a younger woman chase after a distracted man, apologizing for his indifference. Margaret smiled softly. She understood now. Love without respect is a debt that never gets repaid. The final visit. Years later, Ethan visited again, older, wiser. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For stopping." Margaret smiled. "You're welcome." The ending that was always hers. Margaret didn't die bitter. She didn't live lonely. She lived free. And when people asked how she became so confident so